Hello, and welcome to my channel. I am Damien Marie AtHope. In the simplest terms, I am an atheist-humanist philosopher and prehistorical writer-researcher at DamienMarieAtHope.com. I am specifically an axiological atheist. An axiological atheism can be thought to involve ethical and value theory reasoned and moral argument driven apatheism, agnosticism, atheism, antitheism, antireligionism, secularism, and humanism. Axiological atheists can be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. As an axiological atheism's ethically reasoned and constructive pro-humanity. I am an axiological thinker, value theorist. The science of goodness, worthiness, usefulness, valuableness, virtue, reliableness, accuracy, validity, morality, integrity, beneficialness, etc., etc. We axiologists have a value consciousness. And in general, we see the architecture of humanistic humanitarianism value in people that we see as dignity beings. Places and things are not. Axiology is a value theory. In its broadest sense, it involves areas of philosophy that are deemed to encompass some evaluative or evaluation aspect. Therefore, it crosses almost all domains in some way or another. Now for a more detailed terms as to what I am. I am an axiological atheist, an anti-theist, an anti-religionist, secularist, humanist, rationalist, writer, artist, poet, philosopher, advocate, activist with schooling in psychology, sociology, as well as I am an autodidact, self-taught in science, archaeology, anthropology, and philosophy. I promote science and am against pseudoscience, pseudohistory, pseudomorality, things that are found in religion.
Hello.
Hey, good to
How's
see
it
you.
going? Yeah, long time no see.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna give him the link right now.
There's too many anyway.
Yeah, but I believe he's in Kansas or something, so it should be, I would hope, reasonably.
Should be better.
I won't claim to actually know, where he's at, and doesn't even matter to me, as you know, because to me, anyways, borders and states and whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. As you know, I'm sure most people that have watched this also know is anarchist labels like this are just like, a joke. Like it's like someone saying their favorite sports team. I just go, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you like the Americas or whatever. Sure.
Right.
Right.
When people say that they're all gung ho for America or Canada or whatever, England or whatever nationality thing, I always think the same thing. It just sounds like, religions, saying theirs is the best, or, the same thing as, like I said, a sports team or something, It doesn't, I don't actually see that as a real valid thing for myself to operate in the world, in other words.
Yeah, not for me anyway. Yeah, I mean, maybe some people like it or need it or whatever, but it's not for me.
I watched a video where John Hoops, our guest, talked to a person about pseudoarchaeology and stuff. The only part I didn't like is, to me, of course, is that the person seemed to be like really in favor of or want to defend pseudoarchaeology.
Oh.
And so I was like, I thought, man, John is taking this a lot better than I would have.
Right, eh?
But I felt it started off, so I was actually going to start off the opposite way. I was going to, so when he comes on, I'm going to say, in a sense, so people know. So in other words, like, why is this person coming on, I want to set up the so people, in other words, like conspiracy theories. I don't want them to think just because we're some like liberals, and some ivory tower that want to, you get my point.
Right.
I want to say that, look, we're anarcho-communists and both atheists. You're a skeptic. I'm a rationalist. Both come to really similar conclusions generally.
Yeah.
So the point is, at least for me, for damn sure, is that I'm a truth addict. I want the truth. It doesn't always mean that I like the truth that I get, but I really want the truth. And so, and I really have a problem always thinking, how does everyone else not also feel that way? I mean, it's just,
yeah. I don't really get it either, but I guess some people like they don't think that there is such a thing as truth, or they don't think that, people have different ideas about what truth means.
But right. So, but a lot of people that say that stuff also want you to believe their religion. Also want you to believe their conspiracy theory, or their fringe political, like, right wing, political philosophy or something, or that capitalism is good, just the crazy shit.
That's right. Yeah. So then when you're having a conversation with them, you have to often bring up the thing they think is true and be like, okay, but like, you live as though this is the fact, right?
That's what I've said before. If a person said that they don't know anything outside their mind, and I said, you don't operate that way.
No, exactly.
I mean, I don't. Solipsism may sound good to you on paper, but there's not a human that just decides not to eat or whatever, because they'll just die. I mean, they'll finish that through. Yeah. I don't think that's the plan they should be hoping for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or one of the things that I often get hung up on is like the idea, the transference of like the idea of faith. Like sometimes people will say, well, you have faith that you'll wake up tomorrow. Well, no, that's not that's not the same thing. Like, I'm basing that on reasonable expectations. The idea that I expect to wake up tomorrow because there's no reason not to, or the probability is in favor of it, right? Rather than like, it's not faith-based, it's reason-based.
But even if your personal experience was, that still would not be like your personal opinion about your status as being alive tomorrow. Better, like I say, is like the thing about when they try to talk about the sun. Well, how do you know the sun's going to come up? And well, actually, science shows us that the sun doesn't do anything. So but it always reminds me that. And I have a meme that says this, that science isn't common sense. Right. So, but before we get to our guest, I want anyone who is unfamiliar with our channel just to have an understanding of what me and Cory believe and think really quick, so that you'll know. Right. So me and Cory are both, in a sense, anarcho-communists, okay, which is anarchist and communist. But I'm not going to go into that. Just want people to get the background of who we are. We're both atheists. Cory is basically a skeptic. I'm a rationalist, just how we approach things. But we seem to come to similar conclusions. I don't believe any of Grant Hancock's stuff for my own research. But what happened is, how I became an atheist, just real quick, is because of college. I went to college to be a drug and alcohol counselor. And then I had to take one course, actually 2 courses on religion. And after I took the courses, I learned archaeology stuff, and I stopped being religious. I was done. Became an atheist. And then from 2006, I became an activist and realized I don't even want to try to make money or do stuff. It changed my whole life. My whole value structure just changed. So I started to become a truth addict, in a sense. I just wanted to know the truth. So I bought archaeology books, like the Archaeology of Ritual and Religion, that was like $100 and something. And I bought these other archaeology books. I didn't want to hear other ideas. What are the facts? I just lusted to know. Well, I want to know, because I felt like, how do I know to trust other atheists even, right? Other atheists say God's not real, religion is false, or how do I know that? I didn't hardly even know Christianity that I was in, which is why I, in a sense, became an atheist. The more I learned stuff, I was, oh, wow. so the archaeology to me has always been real important. So you understand is, even though I'm not an academic, I've looked at archaeology stuff for a long time. I have no bias to like John Hoops, other than I feel like he's telling the truth from my perspective, just so people know. So I start with the bias. I don't like pseudoarchaeology, just so you know. I try to not. And I do like, John Hoops. And also want to make a real quick thing, too. I have never read a book by Graham Hancock. I don't know. I've never read or saw his TED Talk. I don't care about him, other than other atheists started telling me that real history can't be trusted because of this person. And then I started not liking him, in a sense, because I felt like he's actually harming this movement that I think is should be about truth. Anyway, so because Graham Hancock said that John Hoops was the most vehement and insulting archaeologist, I thought, man, I want to hear from that guy. Go ahead and tell us about you, who you are, and what's up with you and Graham Hancock.
Okay. Well, first off, I want to clarify the pronunciation of my last name.
Okay.
I don't think my parents quite anticipated what the impact might be for my brother, who did not become a basketball player, but they named him Duncan. But he doesn't play basketball. But my family's always pronounced the last name as Hoops. With a double O.
Okay, well, I apologize. I wasn't.
No, that's okay. I just so that people will know. And actually, most people assume that it's Hoops until they hear me talk about it. Unless they see me in a podcast or
Right.
take a course with me, they don't know. But this is part of the truth, that people who see this podcast or listen to this will know the correct pronunciation of my name, and you'll know that they're a little bit up on things. But it rhymes with good books or good looks. Or cooks, but it's Hoops.
Okay.
Something else that I have to confess is that I don't really like the term atheist because I'm not an a-unicornist. I'm not an a-Atlanticist. There are a lot of things that I don't believe in, and I don't see any reason to sort of prioritize the theism part of what I don't believe in. But I've just never had those beliefs in me at all. I also have another confession to make that may tick some people off.
Okay.
But I'm not a big sports fan either, and I understand that there's I think it's football team that's kind of playing a big game this evening in Kansas City, which is near where I live. But someone's saying, "Oh, John, there's the AFC Championship," and I said, "What's the AFC?" I don't
know either.
Sports is not my religion, and nor is basketball. I mean, here, Jayhawk basketball is basically the main religion here, and at the University of Kansas, we've got what I call the Basilica of the Holy Scripture. I don't know if you know what that is, but we've got this multi-million-dollar pavilion that houses the original handwritten rules of basketball, and people make pilgrimages from all over the place to come see the handwritten rules of basketball by James Naismith. And then there's Allen Fieldhouse, which is sort of the temple of basketball. But that's not my religion either. I really don't have a religion. I have plenty of beliefs, and I've got very solid ethics. I have a feeling that I have a good sense of what's right and what's wrong. I treat other humans in humane ways, and I try to be as wise and as experienced as I can be. And actually, I kind of like a quote from Joseph Campbell, who once said, "I don't need religion." No, he once said, "I don't need faith. I have experience," and I think that makes a lot of sense. But just so that you know, I am a co-non-religionist for what it's worth.
Sounds good.
Well, and just so people understand too, I also would not debate Graham. Okay,
right.
If he wants to have a discussion, he has to do it like everyone has a discussion with me, and that is they come on my show. Otherwise, I could care less. So I'm not trying to do this so I can be in Graham's world. I really, once again, why I think that John, is great. And so I wanted to have him on to explain stuff or tell stuff, because I feel like obviously Graham Hancock gets a whole show,
Right. Well, not only, yeah, he's on Joe Rogan all the time. And as you probably know, if you've looked at my Twitter feed, Graham Hancock says, "Oh, archaeologists are such elitists," but he only will talk to me if it's on Joe Rogan. I mean, how elite is that? Not everybody can get on Joe Rogan. And so what I've been saying over and over again is, I'm happy to have a debate with Graham Hancock, but let's just do it on Twitter like everybody else. Anybody who wants to can come debate me on Twitter, and I'm against trolls and assholes and things like that. So I might block somebody if they're not being civil. But I'm happy to have a civil conversation or even a civil debate with anybody. I'm not an elitist that way. If I were, I wouldn't be on Twitter. I wouldn't be on Facebook. I wouldn't be on, I don't use Instagram all that much, but I've been a heavy user of social media since even before the term social media was invented. It goes all the way back. I've been online in one way or another almost every week since 1985.
And I appreciate it. I know other people might half the time are attacking you, or I feel like it sounds like from my side, like, wow. But I want to say that I appreciate what you're doing. I feel it's needed, and if it offends people like Graham Hancock, oh well. I mean, I feel it's absolutely needed.
Well, among the things that I'd like to point out, and I think this becomes really super important, is that Graham Hancock twists things. He doesn't represent things. His facts are not presented in a correct way. One of the things that he does is create a parade of straw men. He kind of sets things up and misrepresents things so that he can make them easier to argue against. And
Right.
He's done that with me. I never called Graham Hancock a racist. I never called Graham Hancock a white supremacist. I never said either of those things. What I said was that the claims that Graham Hancock has made align historically with racist and white supremacist narratives, which is the truth. They do. The kinds of things that he's saying have been said for over a century by hardcore racists and white supremacists. And that's not a good thing.
I agree it's not. In fact, I've said the same thing, because I said that I see that archaeologists, on one of the other videos, I just made a comment. I said I see archaeologists are bringing up this issue of it being about racism or stuff, or tied to it, or and I said, to me, I said, as soon as I heard him say Cro-Magnon, and the fact that he talks about floods, well, if you go read the Wikipedia page, that's what I was telling the people, that Cro-Magnon, it says that there's this belief, that where the people were trying to prove, like the Bible or whatever, or Noah's flood, and believed in this great deluge, thing, that it was connected. So, and then I said he also said that some of the people that came over to the Americas were Caucasoid or whatever, or Caucasian. And I said, even that
versus them as white or fair skinned, but yeah, there's definitely an implication that they were white people.
Right. But so what I feel like that from what I've looked at, so I can, my own, without you saying he's wrong, my own sense that he's wrong is the DNA. I've been looking at DNA and how it goes from America all over. I've actually looked at all over the world and stuff, all the different DNAs. So the stuff that he says in his blog of it's R1B, and tries to connect it to the merit bar culture 24,000 years ago, and then the fact that then the branches off and 16,000 years ago starts having blonde hair, and he feels gets into his Caucasian features. But I say what's funny is that actually neither of those cultures, that's why I said in my thing, neither of those cultures in Siberia went to the Americas. It's an ancestor of them, in a sense, that came in the DNA line before them, and they all, in a sense, share. Not these people went there. So to me, and I was saying, if you look at what he's trying to say at time, then those people would have walked over. They wouldn't have had to be seafarers or whatever.
No,
so
they probably occupied what we call Beringia, which is this territory between Siberia and Alaska. And the thing is, that's totally consistent with our understanding of everything from geology to DNA to archaeology to geology to geomorphology, all of these types of things. I mean, archaeology does not stand by itself. Archaeology is what's called consilient with all of the other sciences. We are dependent upon biology, chemistry, physics, everything. You can't just isolate archaeology and say those archaeologists are wrong, because then you're implying that all of these other things are wrong as well. We use environmental studies, we use ecology. All of these types of things have to fit together. On top of which, we apply things like Occam's razor. You know, what is it that strips out all of the assumptions that you make about things that you don't know anything about?
Right.
You know, and needless to say, I think in terms of atheism, to get back to that particular concept, Occam's razor means that you don't need a god, you don't need aliens, you don't need anything supernatural. You can explain stuff perfectly well without resorting to any of those types of things. And I like to point out to people, you know, if you're going someplace and you can't find your car keys, you don't go certain places. You don't say, oh, well, you know, the Sasquatch must have taken my car keys and that's why I can't find them, so let me go hunt for the Sasquatch. That's not what you do. You assume that your car keys are in the last place that you left them. You don't think some alien crawled through the window and took your car keys, or you don't imagine your car keys dematerializing and being transported to some other place. You just find the fucking car keys wherever it was you last left them. You don't invoke all of these ghosts or demons or angels or whatever it happens to be to find your car keys, right?
Yeah, exactly. But also, I think, to me personally, you bring up the issue of different kinds of speculations, which I try to say that Graham's are not, they're like, you know, unjustified and wild. They don't even belong. So you can't even start any reasonable thing because they don't start any with reason. And so I think, like you said, so like saying that aliens took my socks, or my left sock is gone, thus it must be God.
And what happens to those socks? I still can't answer that question. I've lost so many damn socks.
Yeah. But you get what I'm saying is that that's not the same as like I saw a video where I have a feeling, to me, my own speculation, before an archaeologist said it, although it said it for, you know, if someone said it. I felt that Göbekli Tepe probably had some relation to sky burials or something, right? So I heard an archaeologist say that may be true because of the animals that pick the bones. Anyways, my point is, and he said speculation, same as mine, speculation. And I try to say that a lot so people get that I'm not claiming that I know this or this is a fact. So I want, and also I feel like it's important because that too many people they'll say I believe, or they're confident. Well, they're speculating. So I feel like it's good to identify what you are doing. And then also I feel, because like I said, with Graham has no justification to start even a reasonable speculation. You know, it's like saying, you know, ancient aliens use Göbekli Tepe or something. You're like, yeah, that's not even a starter. What?
Right. Well, that's very true. And he will say straight out, he says, I will believe. And then he'll make a slight shift and he'll say, I firmly believe.
Yeah.
And then he moves to things like, it's probably, and he'll just set up this one thing after the next after next. And you can see that he's building a house of cards. The foundation is just not there. But I don't know if you remember the tweet that I sent in response to his tweet inviting me to debate on Joe Rogan. Do you know which one I'm referring to?
I shared like almost everything you do because, I mean, this is really important to me. So,
well, he sent out a tweet in which he said he was inviting me to debate him on Joe Rogan. I can't remember exactly what it was he wrote. And I wrote back, the tweet that I said is, I'm sorry, but I cannot debate metaphysics with science. Yeah. And I also said, I'm not going to use a different metaphysics to debate your metaphysics. Because what Graham Hancock is doing is not science. It's very far from science. It's bordering on it is speculation, but it's border on faith-based belief.
Right. Well, that's how I would say it's bad speculation. In other words, I was saying, like, also, there's not, because people say, we'll say wild speculation. Well, you also mean that some speculations are not wild. And it doesn't mean that they are, in a sense, proven. That's why it's important. You don't know. You need to remove that.
It's worth asking. It's worth asking these questions. They're not. I mean, I'm not rejecting these questions. What I would point out with the lost civilization of the Ice Age thing is that it is totally legitimate to ask that question, but that question was asked 140 years ago, and answers were given over 100 years ago, and we should pretty much be done with that. It's like, okay.
Could you tell us about that? Because I now know, because you shared that, but I would not have known that other than the Cro-Magnon, just because I had looked at the Gravitans and the Orcanation cultures of the Paleolithic, in Europe.
Right.
The only reason I knew the Cro-Magnon thing. So as soon as you said it, I went, wait a minute. I know that has some racist kind of, or something's not right about that. But so I didn't know about the other books and stuff really until the archaeologists like you addressed this. I mean, I didn't care about.
Well, I think it's really in people to know this history, because as archaeologists know, everything has a beginning. Whether it's a type of arrowhead or spear point or pottery or whatever, everything begins someplace. And so among the things that we do as archaeologists is try to find what the roots of things are. Where did this thing come from? And the fact is that the whole mythology of Atlantis, something that a lot of people knew about because they studied ancient Greek. But it was popularized by a Minnesota congressman whose name was Ignatius Donnelly in the 1880s. And we can look at Congress right now, and we can see it's got a bunch of weird thinking crackpots in there.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
And Ignatius Donnelly was sort of along those lines. Now, what's important is that he was politically progressive, and he actually would have been seen as a liberal at his time. He was interested in founding utopian communities and doing some new things economically. But interestingly, the main context in which he wrote about Atlantis was in trying to justify and dignify certain immigrants to the United States. In particular, 1882, which is the same year that he published Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, was a year that Congress was passing laws restricting immigration to the United States.
Okay.
And Donnelly, and you can tell from Donnelly's last name. Can you guess what his ethnicity was?
Donnelly,
Irish.
Ignatius is a weird,
right?
Irish, exactly. He was Irish, but he was descended from Irish families that had immigrated long before the potato famine. Among the things that he was very concerned with in the 1870s, 1880s, was the horrible discrimination against poor Irish who had immigrated to the United States in the wake of the potato famine. There was a lot of racism for gingers, a lot of disrespect for people who were ethnically Irish. The whole story about Mrs. O'Leary's cow knocking over the lanterns, starting the Chicago fire. That was a anti-Irish slander. And you would see signs that would say no Negroes, no Jews, no Irish. So Donnelly was seeking to rehabilitate and elevate the status of Irish people, and especially Irish immigrants to the U.S., because he himself was ethnically Irish. And what he does with his book, Atlantis World, which was a popular book written for an audience, was to explain how all of the refugees from the lost continent of Atlantis had populated other parts of the world, and that Atlantis was the source of immigrants. But he also sort of traces the origins of the Irish to ancient Atlantis, which elevated the idea of Irish in the conception of the average Americans. Now, what's interesting about it, he was writing about this ancient land that he thought existed in the Atlantic Ocean. And ultimately, what he was doing was justifying European immigration.
Right.
Because at that time, the main issue, the main concern in terms of immigration to the United States was coming from East Asia, principally Chinese, Japanese and Chinese, but
right, like the Chinese Exclusion Act stuff.
Well, exactly. This Chinese Exclusion Act and other legislation was seeking to limit the immigration of Chinese while opening possibilities for European immigrants, especially coming from Western Europe, so like the Italians and the Irish and the Scottish and others. So anyway, in 1882, Ignatius Donnelly publishes this book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, which is something that he had researched in the Library of Congress. Now, he didn't have any background in archaeology. He was piecing things together here and there from what he read. Academic archaeology was kind of in its infancy at that time, as was anthropology. So people were just beginning to put things together. There was a lot of interest in reconstructing the ancient world, which sort of followed on the heels of Charles Darwin, who published On the Origin of Species in 1859. So through the 1860s and into the 1870s, people were very interested in reconstructing what the ancient past was like. He published, Charles Darwin published The Descent of Man in 1871. So we're talking about just 11 years after The Descent of Man. Donnelly publishes in 1882 this book in which he builds up this whole story about what ancient Atlantis had been like and who lived there and what happened when it was destroyed and where the immigrants went. And it becomes a very popular book. And it really is the foundation for modern conceptions of Atlantis, which actually have been modified through a whole host of other types of things. The other person who wrote, well, there were many other people who wrote about Atlantis. They included Helena Blavatsky, who was one of the founders of the Theosophical Society, and sort of the founder of what might be the New Age movement in the United States. She and Henry Steele Olcott founded the Theosophical Society in 1875, which was supposed to be a synthesis of religion and science. And it actually had some very good goals. The Theosophists, for example, were involved in demissionizing Hindus and Buddhists in India and Sri Lanka. They actually were working against the Christian missionaries to restore Hinduism and Buddhism.
Well, people should, to me, I'm an anarchist, so to me, people should be able to have their own religion. I don't. I mean, I have the right to say that I don't think it's true, but I mean,
right.
I would never take away someone's rights to
well, what's interesting is that the Theosophists were very much anti-Christian. They believed in reincarnation. They embraced Eastern religions, and among the things that made them very controversial at the time is that they were believing all of these things that Eastern religions believe. Right. Interestingly, Henry Steele Olcott, who was a co-founder of the Theosophical Society, was the first American to actually be cremated instead of buried. It was the Theosophists who introduced cremation as a practice, something that many people take for granted these days.
Yeah.
But Blavatsky was also a channeler. She was a medium. She was a spiritualist. In fact,
she believed she was, is what you mean, right?
Well, yeah. I mean,
or do you believe that she actually could do that? I mean, I don't believe that.
I don't believe that she did. No, but she and Olcott actually met while they were investigating the Fox sisters in upstate New York. Do you know who the Fox sisters were? They actually helped contribute to the growth of the spiritualist movement. Because
I probably have heard about it before, yes, because I've watched a little bit about the spiritualist movement. But
well, they were famous for holding seances, and they would ask questions, and the spirits of the dead would answer by making these loud rapping noises. And so you could ask a question about ask a question of your dead grandmother, yes or no, and she would give one rap for one and two raps for no, or something like that. Well, anyway, it was ultimately revealed that the Fox sisters, these two teenage girls who later became older, I think they continued doing this into their teens and 20s, were especially gifted, not at clairvoyance, but at making very loud cracks with their toes. And it turned out all of these rappings were being done by their toes. And it was all and that many of the spiritualist seances were actually kind of parlor tricks. People, making things materialize out of nowhere, or creating this substance called ectoplasm, or all of these types of things. Some of which were just tricks of photography. I mean, people at that time didn't know that a double exposure. They didn't know how you made a double exposure. So they'd look at these photographs and say, "Oh, there's a picture of a ghost in there." Well,
yeah.
We now know that ghosts are, they're tricks of light and things like that. Anyway, to make a long story short,
reasonable people. You should say reasonable people know there's not ghosts. Because I've had people like, look at this picture. There's a bubble in it. That's my grandmother. I'm like, you don't know that. Even if ghosts are real, you don't know that.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And with every advance or every change in technology in photography, we get more of these claims. I used to think it was amusing that when digital cameras were introduced, because of the way the lens on a digital camera worked, it would make these artifacts in photographs that people refer to as orbs. And it was just the electronic flash reflecting off of dust or raindrops or whatever, and people would see these pictures. Oh, I took a picture of an orb. Look at these orbs that are moving around. They must be spirits or things like that. No, it's just something that's appearing because of your digital camera and electronic flash. Anyway, I got a little bit off track, but Blavatsky and the spiritualists and the theosophists and others are promoting these stories of Atlantis. They also promote stories of
I didn't know that. So the spiritualists, I never believed in Atlantis. So anyone who's hoping, I don't know if Cory did, but I certainly never cared about Atlantis. But Atlantis,
well, it was big business in the 1890s through the 1920s or so, and part of the way it became big business among the theosophists is that they believed in past life regression, and among the things that theosophists would do is to have sessions with people in which they could regress their past lives and tell them, where they had come from. And so some people were in ancient Athens, others were in ancient Egypt. But if you paid enough money to the person who is your spiritual guide, you might have had a past life on Atlantis, or you might have had a past life on Lemuria. And actually, it's been shown that I think Jason Colavito has made this very, very clear in his research on the theosophists, that in fact, some of the very first ancient aliens hypotheses came from the fact that these past life regression sessions would say, oh, you had a former life on Mars. You had a former life on Venus. You had a former life on Saturn. And they imagined these other worlds as being ones where in the past you were an incarnation of an ancient Martian. And that sort of morphed into the idea that, well, maybe these ancient Martians visited Earth at some point, and there you have it. But the ancient aliens beliefs can be traced to the theosophists and these practices. Among the other things,
I thought it was just that hideous show on the so-called hashtag so-called History Channel.
Yeah. Well, it has deeper roots, and all of this stuff is in, it's in the context of that Victorian Gothic era when people were interested in these kinds of things. And actually, that has an interesting history in itself, because it has to do with modern warfare. It has to do, a lot of it had to do with the Civil War, where tens of thousands of people died far away from home, and their remains were never returned. So people never had closure with their loved ones who had died. And we find Mary Todd Lincoln and Abraham Lincoln, for example, having seances in the White House so they can contact their dead son. But people whose sons had never returned from the battlefield wanted some kind of closure. So the idea that you could contact and converse with spirits of the dead was very comforting to a lot of people.
Yeah, I can see how that would be motivating.
So that became a part of it also. But anyway, it's in the context of this stuff that you get a popularization of discussions about Atlantis. And Donnelly is doing it, and then there's this guy named Augustus Le Plongeon who's also talking about Atlantis. He was an early archaeologist who worked at Chichen Itza, the Yucatan, and other Maya sites.
Right.
And he came up with this whole theory that the ancient Egyptians had actually descended from the ancient Mayans, but via Atlantis. The advanced Mayas had gone to Atlantis, and then after Atlantis sank, they went to Egypt. So he had this whole 10,000 year chronology of tracing Egyptian history to Atlantis.
That almost sounds like Graham Hancock's ideas.
Well, this is the thing. Graham Hancock's ideas are not new. Okay, they're found by Ignatius Donnelly, and then look up this guy Augustus Le Plongeon, who actually, among the things that Augustus Le Plongeon was obsessed with, was finding the ancient roots of Freemasonry. And he actually believed that the very first Masonic beliefs could be traced to the ancient Mayas, and of course could be traced through Egypt and Atlantis to the Mayas. But
why always Atlantis?
Well, it had to do with the appeal of Plato, for example, and we can get into some of that, but it's really fascinating history to understand where these things came from.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
But Le Plongeon, I mean, both Donnelly and Le Plongeon were talking about this civilization that existed 11,000 years ago. I mean, they were introducing the same chronology that Hancock is repeating today. And so these ideas are not new to Hancock. In fact, what Hancock does is he revives these Victorian cosmologies and then doesn't tell the history. He doesn't tell who thought of this before. He doesn't say anything about these other writers, and makes it seem like he's come up with this stuff on his own, when in fact he has not. And this is something archaeologists know, is that he's kind of hiding the original roots of these various ideas. And even Ignatius Donnelly's second book about Atlantis, he actually had several other books. Actually, Ignatius Donnelly is also known for writing a book in which he promoted the theory that that a lot of Shakespeare's works have been written by Sir Francis Bacon, who had hidden messages in Shakespeare's plays. Anyway, that was Donnelly also.
Okay,
but I've heard of that. Didn't remember who it was, but I've heard of that.
But Donnelly's first book on Atlantis was published in 1882. The following year, he published a sequel that was called Ragnarok: The Age of Fire and Gravel. Now,
is it Ragnarok in Nordic mythology?
Absolutely. Yes, it is. And that's where he got the name from.
Oh, okay.
But in Ragnarok, which was published in 1883, okay, we're talking 140 years ago.
Wow.
Ignatius Donnelly proposed that Atlantis had been destroyed by a comet, and that this comet had caused a worldwide flood that was the same as the flood of Noah in the Bible. You know, all of these ideas, which are part of ancient apocalypse, were published 140 years ago. And most people don't know about Donnelly because his work is, quite frankly, pretty obscure. But this stuff is not new. And archaeologists have had plenty of time to consider it, to respond to it, to identify it as bullshit. And we've known this for a long time. I've known it for a long time because, and this is absolutely true, in 1973, 50 years ago, when I was in the 10th grade in a Baltimore City public high school, the first research paper that I ever wrote was on the lost continent of Atlantis.
Wow.
And for
you
that
were
reason,
on top of it way back then?
well,
Wow.
The 70s was a weird time, and I was into weirdness at the time, but I actually read Donnelly's book in 1973. So this is something I've known about for 50 years. Most people have never even heard of him, but it's very familiar to me.
Yeah, I watched the show where you were recorded, and you said I have his 9 books. Guess what? I didn't know he had 9 books.
Oh, he's got about 12, depending on how you count.
Oh, it's even more books than I thought.
And
I thought he had like 1 book, and then he had made this video series. I mean,
his first book along these lines, his first kind of speculative book, was actually published in 1992, and it's a book called The Sign and the Seal, and it's based on his experience working in East Africa and particular Ethiopia. But the focus of the book is his quote unquote theory, which actually is not his. It's something that it just exists in the world. He didn't come up with it. That the lost Ark of the Covenant is hidden in a Christian church in Ethiopia, and that was what his book was about. Was the location of the lost Ark, and it's a big fat book, And you can guess how it goes, which is that he writes chapter after chapter after chapter about his adventures exploring and talking to people and collecting this information that was going to lead him to the discovery of the lost Ark. And then in the very last chapter of the book, what you realize is that he never actually got to see this Ark. He was not admitted into the secret sanctum of the church. And so you sort of finish the book having been teased the entire book, thinking that he's going to find the lost Ark, and no, he concludes that it's hidden and nobody's showing it to him, and he wasn't admitted to go see it. So, he did not have any evidence. He didn't have the hard evidence of the lost Ark. But all of us know, Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark came out in 1981.
Yeah.
11 years later, Graham Hancock is cashing in on the fascination with the lost Ark. Where is this thing? And that's his first book. That's 1992. He then goes on to write several after that. The best-selling one is called Fingerprints of the Gods, which he published in 1995. And it's kind of promoted in the context of other interest in this fringe stuff. It's actually being supported by mainstream TV. In 1993, there's an NBC documentary narrated by Charlton Heston, who later becomes, the president of the NRA, but narrated by Charlton Heston, called Mysteries of the Sphinx. And it's one that presents the idea that the Sphinx is not 2500 BC, but 10,000 BC. And then
I have a question, because I'm not real familiar. And you're better with the pseudoarchaeology.
Sure.
Why is it that when I look at archaeologists and they say it's this date, how would I know? I trust that they're going to be accurate. I mean, I'm just. Am I missing something that?
No, you're not missing anything.
Many of these people look at it and go, you know what? I think it's 10,000 years older than anyone thinks it is. Like, why would you? I mean,
right.
Is that normal?
It depends. It depends. A lot of these narratives, and this should not be surprising to you at all, a lot of these narratives happen because they are a rejection of established authority. That it's not about the details of how old the Sphinx is. It's not about the details of whether Atlantis existed or not. It's not about the details of whether anything Graham Hancock says is right or wrong. It's all about sticking it to the man. And the man is the professor at the university who studied this for 50 years and who doesn't know what he's talking about because he's concealing it. He's part of a conspiracy to hide the truth from the general public. And here's the good news. Here's the good news. You don't have to get a PhD. You don't have to get a master's degree. You don't even have to college. You don't even have to go to college. All you have to do is watch this YouTube channel and you will have all the information that you need.
Yep.
Yeah.
That it's part of that thinking. All you have to do is watch
kind of
this
like religion. You don't have to think it all. We'll do it all for you. And anything that seems weird, just us only.
Well, more than anything of complexity. It's a fear that things are complicated. And in fact, it's much easier to have a simple explanation. Everything happens for a reason. Don't worry, honey. It's all in God's hands. It's a rejection of that complexity. For people who are religionists, for people who, believe the Bible is the word of God, if it ain't in the Bible, you don't need to worry about it. If you're confused or you don't know about something, then you go and ask your pastor or ask somebody who can provide you with that answer. You don't need to be concerned about it yourself, because the answer is going to be there in your religion. And that's just not how archaeology rolls. That's just not how science works. I mean, we see the world as very, very, very complicated, and we're not afraid of that. In fact, we think that's kind of cool. Like, oh man, this is a really complicated puzzle to solve. We're going to figure this whole thing out. But we also say we can do it. We will figure it out. We will be able to learn some new things. We don't just open up this book and read a few verses and have the answer, because it's not going to be found there. We need to actually come up with some new knowledge, some new information, do some experiments, keep things open to all of the possibilities. And that's actually kind of the opposite of what Graham Hancock says that we do. He says that, academics and archaeologists are very closed-minded. That's simply not the case. We're open to all kinds of things. We just have to be able to test them. We have to be able to look at the evidence. We have to be able to evaluate them. And we're not going to be authoritarian or orthodox or dogmatic, because the whole reason our way of knowledge exists was the rejection of the authority of the church, was the rejection of centralized truth that came from faith-based knowledge as opposed to scientific-based knowledge. In fact, someone was pointing out to me on Twitter just this morning that the whole science of geology began with people thinking that they were going to be able to prove the truth of the Great Flood in the Bible. And the more they began doing research, the more they began realizing, oh man, this is probably not the best explanation. There's other data here, and in fact, and that eventually led to the realization that the world is not only 6,000 years old, and that you can't figure out the age of the universe by counting all the begats and begats and begats in the book of Genesis. That in fact, oh shit, it's not just 6,000 years old, it's 13 billion years old, or 13.7 billion years, or whatever it is. There's a lot more to it than what was passed down from the sacred scriptures.
And I have a question. So, would you say that all archaeologists agree that I want also the people understand
what you're doing is that simplification thing again. Okay, you can't say all archaeologists.
Well, no, I'm just trying. Well, did your experience? How about that? That you've experienced? Would you say most archaeologists don't agree that his things hold any water? I'm just like a consensus. Would you think that that's the
let me point out a way that you can tell. If there were an archaeologist who agreed with what Gray Hancock is saying, don't you think that he would put him front and center on his?
Well, that's true. Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's a good point.
He can't find a single archaeologist who will speak in favor of his theory. Not one.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah. So I was wondering.
And that's why he doesn't like archaeologists.
But I was wondering also, and I wanted to hear so that it wouldn't just be assumed that that's the case, but that you're stating it, because I feel like
right.
And I want to say that even as a non-archaeologist, hearing the stuff that he says about archaeologists, when I have dealt with archaeologists myself as friends, because I've been wanting the truth, I was offended that how he's saying stuff, because I feel like besides every other thing he's saying that's got a lot of fallacies in it, he is the holder of the burden of proof. You, as the alternate, theory of any kind, whether it's philosophy or science or archaeology, you hold the burden of proof. The archaeologist doesn't have any obligation to accept it. In fact, I feel, just personally, in the science mind, they have every reason to not accept it and demand justification. So to get mad at that, I feel like then you're not really. Are you really a truth seeker? If you get mad,
right.
Are you really? I don't feel that's in a sense an intellectually honest thing to do. I said, if you challenge me, I want the truth. If you say stuff that's reasonable and give me evidence in it, and I can't believe my thing anymore with the justification, I'm going to go ahead and trust it and go move on. So, because I feel like that's just an epistemically, rational and honest thing to do, is that you should be willing to take new facts that even if they are against your position, and go with the facts, the truth.
Right. Well, a metaphor that I like to use, and I think metaphors are really helpful. A metaphor is a diamond, which is a 10 on the Mohs scale, right? A piece of chalk or something like that would be a 1 on the Mohs scale. And the way that you go up the Mohs scale is the scratch or streak test. Okay, if it streaks, it's softer. If it scratches, it's harder. And you kind of work your way through various materials, whether it's limestone or granite or whatever. You can figure out the hardness of something, and when you get up to the top at 10, that's a diamond. Well, the metaphor is that the truth is like a diamond. And it should be something that you can try to scratch. And you actually should try to scratch in every possible way that you can to scratch this thing and see whether you can scratch it. Because whatever you can scratch it with is going to be more durable, is going to be a truthier truth than whatever truth it is that you're challenging.
I totally agree.
If you really want to find the truth, you take every tool available and try to scratch at it and see how far you can get. And those tools include looking at logical fallacies. Is this logically sound, or can we find some flaws in it? Or is this particular fact something that's well known, or has it been misrepresented, or is it softer than we actually think that it is? Right. And if you're taking these things and trying them against this diamond of truth, and they're not scratching it, but instead the diamond is scratching them, then you know that you're not there yet. And what I like to point out, and part of the reason why I have no interest in debating Graham Hancock at all, is because it's very easy to dismiss his claims just by simple applications of basic principles of logical, scientific, rational thought, such as Occam's razor, or the concept of falsifiability, or identifying the logical fallacies, such as setting up a straw man, or cherry picking, or the black and white fallacy, or ad hominem fallacies, or a whole host of things. I mean, there's a long list of logical fallacies, and if somebody's using that, then they're not logically sound. So that becomes a question. Can we find the logical fallacies in his arguments? Well, yes, you can. You can actually make a list. People should do this. Make a list of known logical fallacies, and then listen to Graham Hancock or look at his books and check off the fallacies. What
would be really funny is invent a game. The Gone, game about Graham Hancock's logical fallacies, and you have to draw cards or spin a thing or something, and then choose the fallacy and then what he said, why. That would be like amazing. Anyway,
I think it's a really good exercise in critical thinking, is to be able to spot these things. Oh, that's a straw man. Oh, that's cherry picking.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an ad hominem. Oh, that's argument from ignorance, which is pretty common, which is basically saying, well, we don't know, so it must be this. That's an
science made a mistake one time, thus we can never trust science. Like, what?
Yeah,
what are you talking about?
Yeah, well, or evolution causes people to question God. Therefore, we can't teach evolution, or society will completely fall apart. It's that slippery slope fallacy. There's a whole long list of them, and one of the things I like to point people to is there's an excellent book which I use in my courses, written by Carl Sagan, the great Carl Sagan, and it's called "The Demon Haunted World: Science as a Candle in the Darkness."
Yep.
And in that book, he's got a chapter that's called the Baloney Detection Kit, which I'm sure his editor made him change the name of, because it was probably originally titled the Bullshit Detection Kit.
Probably.
But in that, it's a list of tools, basically tools that you can use to test the quality of knowledge. We'll just take that chapter and take those tools and apply them to Graham Hancock. You don't have to be believing in anything. You don't have to be dismissing anything. You're just testing. You're just using some tools to test something.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hold up at all. It really doesn't. If you know how to detect bullshit or baloney, then it'll be pretty obvious right from the start.
Yeah, but I think it is what's sad to me is how persuasive he is, because I deal with more atheists than I deal probably with religious people because of my being such an out atheist activist. But I was shocked at how many atheists try to push Graham Hancock stuff on me, or once in a while will say something about Atlantis, or once in a while will say they believe in ancient aliens, and I'm like, what?
Well, something that I find very telling, Hancock charges archaeologists with being orthodox and dogmatic and closed-minded. But the way that you can tell what's going on here is to take those same atheist friends of yours and just push back a little bit. Do they get defensive? Do they get hostile? Do they act like they're being attacked personally?
Yes.
Those are all signs that what they're believing is actually more of a internalized belief. It's not an open-mindedness and a questioning and evaluation. It becomes something that they take personal offense that you're even asking the question.
Yes, they do.
And that's not a good sign. Um,
And well, I've actually had a couple of them actually unfriend me, or whatever, or block me, because they feel like I'm being too harsh. And I'm like, I am not. And they always go, you just have a bias towards academia. I'm like, literally, I say I am not an academic. I don't have a bias. I don't make any money, so I'm not, I don't charge a patron. I don't have one. I don't monetize this. I don't monetize my website. Every single thing I do is for free, and I have tons of links. That's the reason, like I said once again, why I like it is because that's where you find truth. If I thought that Graham Hancock could get to where Damien wants for truth, then I would be more interested. But like you just said, I just hear him talking. I'm like, oh man, I don't even have to know half things he's saying. It's like the way he's doing it is a con man to me,
right.
or a person selling something.
Well, and that's a very good instinct. But of course, it becomes an ad hominem attack if you're not evaluating it on the basis of the theories, on the basis of the claims, and instead are dismissing it on the basis of the person. And I use the example of a guy named Frank Joseph, who's one of the principal writers about Atlantis and Lemuria and all of these types of things. Well, Frank Joseph is his pen name. His actual name is Frank Collin, which actually was a family name that was changed from Cohen because his father was actually a Holocaust survivor. But among the things that Frank Collin and Frank Joseph became notorious for is that he was a leader of the Nazi Party in the United States, and is the one who actually organized a march on Skokie, Illinois, back in the 1970s, 77, I think it was. And you may have seen the meme that says, "I hate Illinois Nazis." Well, that was based on Frank Collin, who actually was booted from the Nazis because it was discovered that he had hidden the fact that his father was Jewish. And when the other Nazis discovered that he had a Jewish ancestry, they kicked him out. And in the process of doing that, discovered that in his office at the Nazi headquarters in Chicago, he had papers indicating that he had been engaging in pedophilia with some young boys.
Wow.
And so Collin was not only a neo-Nazi, but also a convicted pedophile, and spent several years in prison. And it was while he was in prison that he began writing pseudoarchaeology and began writing about Atlantis and all of this type of stuff. But what I point out is when you're evaluating Frank Joseph's work, you should set aside the fact that he was a neo-Nazi, set aside the fact that he was a convicted pedophile. You have to evaluate his claims on the basis of the claims, because anything else is biased.
Well, yeah, correct. I'm not.
It's illogical. Nazis can be correct. Even pedophiles can be correct.
I don't understand what I'm saying. I'm a rationalist. Right? Nothing about that is a disagreement to me. I wasn't saying that the reason why I feel that Graham Hancock is wrong is because I feel like when I first heard him, I just went, "Wow, con." But I'm saying is I heard that. And then I heard him say stuff, and I already knew about my own study about DNA, and I go, he's wrong. What is he talking about? And so my judgment.
Yeah. Well, if you know the facts and know the information, it becomes a contest of whose information is correct.
And then, like I said, I had to have to trust the other archaeological stuff. Some of the stuff I don't know. That archaeologists are skilled in saying that they also know he's wrong about other things. So, but I the DNA stuff, to me, he's wrong. Period. I mean, you can watch a migration video from Africa, the whole DNA, how it becomes. I mean, you can. So I feel like also because of that, him to bring that up and think that somehow there's no wishy-washy. I mean, yeah. But so what I'm saying is, that is where I feel strongly. I feel super strongly about that because what I know about DNA, the claims he made, ridiculous.
Sure.
So all the other stuff I agree with too. I'm trusting, and I do know some of the stuff, but I mean, I'm not super skilled on the different
and nobody is. Nobody is going to have geology or archaeology or biology or whatever it happens to be to evaluate it. But the thing is, if you know these logical tools, if you are a rational thinker, you don't need a PhD, you don't need a master's degree, you don't even need to have gone to college. If you know how to use these basic tools of rational, logical thinking and the evaluation of information, it doesn't matter how much education you've had. They work for everybody. They work for everybody, regardless of ethnicity or religion or education or employment or financial status or any of that stuff. That's the beauty of these logical tools and the scientific method, is that they work objectively for everyone. You don't have to be a member of a particular religion for them to work for you. In fact, they tend to work best if you don't have those other bias. So the problem here becomes the bias towards rationality, and that's a bigger philosophical issue, and actually is quite a big philosophical issue, because bottom line is, I don't think that Graham Hancock or other people like him value rationality. In fact, I think that many of them are coming from what ultimately is a faith-based belief system, which is, it falls within a bigger category of things that are known as traditionalism. There's a big mixed collection of things. Another is the notion of perennialism. And in fact, one of these philosophical beliefs that comes from perennialism is the idea that, in fact, history is cyclical, that it's characterized by these periodic catastrophic destructions and rebirths. This cycle of destruction and rebirth goes on forever, really. And it's actually where the concept of the new age comes from, is that at the end of the destruction of this age, there will be a new age that comes after that. And in fact, in Graham Hancock's cosmology, there's not only an ancient apocalypse, but there's a future apocalypse. And that's part of his message is, he thinks that the world will be destroyed again. And that the reason that destruction will happen is because we have strayed from the moral path, because we have been prideful and we have not done those things that we need to do. And in fact, these apocalypses are cosmic retribution that's coming from some supernatural force or some way that the universe is organized. So that there have been a series of destructions and rebirths in the past, and there will be a destruction that's coming soon, and you better get ready for that, because it's probably going to come in our lifetime, maybe even next year, maybe even in the next 10 years. But that's been Hancock's line for the past 25, 27 years or so, is that the end is coming and you better get ready. Or maybe we can avert this disaster if we all believe the right thing and we all meditate together and we all kind of focus our psychic energies. Maybe we can avert this disaster that's coming.
I hope that people desire truth and real stuff and stop being, truther movements and conspiracy theories and, desire real stuff. But I was going to say, I don't want to just talk about Graham Hancock. I want to say, could you tell us about what you're doing? Because it does interest me, shamanism, because I've looked into a lot of shamanism in Asia and stuff. So the whole idea of this stuff, even though I'm an anti-religionist, I want to know what they thought, why they thought. I like the whole stuff. So could you go ahead and just explain to us some of your insights or knowledge or things you found interesting about? Because aren't you studying shamanism, I think, or something?
Yeah.
In I don't know if it's Mesoamerica or what exactly, but
I
explain all that, because I'd like to hear about that, not just waste our whole show on Graham Hancock. I want to hear some truth.
Well, I'm an anthropologist above all.
Okay.
I focus on archaeology, which is the study of the past using material evidence. But as an anthropologist, what I'm really interested in is the human experience. Why are humans the way they are? How did we get to be the way that we are, and what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do moving ahead? Right. I actually do, even though I'm not a believer, I actually do think that there are some ethical systems that come from religion that are actually beneficial to humanity. And one of them actually comes out of Judaism, and it's the concept of tikkun olam, repairing the world. The part of the good things for humans to do is to repair this broken world, to fix the things that we see are wrong.
Right. Well, I know that there's some papers I saw that they were using totemism beliefs to care about environmentalism.
Absolutely, and that's something that you find in lots of different cultures. I mean, this is not just it's not a Western thing. It's not
That's what I meant.
Jewish thing. Most human beings on this planet have had an ethic of fixing those things they see that are wrong. If something's broken, fix it. If you can't fix it, make a new one. But help people, help the younger people, help the older people, help the people around you. Just be a good person. You don't have to be a believer to be a good person.
I totally. Well, we're both humanists, so we totally are.
You've also
go ahead.
Well, you've also said that you're communists, which of course means that you are interested in more than just kind of individual success or the success of a particular small elite group or the success of the few individuals who are able to make the most money before they die or whatever it happens to be. There's an ethic of a concern for the greater good. There's an ethic of concern for larger groups of people, that we recognize that we are connected with other people and that we benefit from helping those people around us.
See, I told him you're cool.
But you mentioned shamanism, and that's something I'm very interested in. I teach it and study it in the context of critical thinking, which is that what are some of the rational ways to look at this, and by looking at it rationally and looking at it critically, can we gain some insights into how human psychology works? Can we gain some insights into how motivation and creativity and mood and all of those things are affected? Because, I mean, for me, it just comes from some obvious observations that I've made. If I'm in a crappy mood, there are songs that I can listen to. There's music that I can put on my headphones, and it will totally change my mood. It'll shift my mode of thinking. There are things that I can physically do that will make me feel better or that will motivate me. There are also things that I can do that make me feel a whole lot worse. And so I try to avoid those types of things. But we have psychology. We have a very complex mix of hormones and electrical signals and other types of things that affect how we feel. And shamanism is concerned with those kinds of things. It's concerned with our relationship with nature, our relationship with other organisms, the relationship that we have with the connectedness that we feel with the rest of the world. How does that affect our internal states? How is that something that then can help us in different ways? Either by helping us to be creative and innovative and think of something new that nobody ever thought of before, or helping us to go to a place that is good for us in terms of a psychology so that we don't jump out the window or take a hammer to the person in the office next to us or do other kinds of bad things.
Exactly.
How can you shape your mind in ways that are going to be beneficial to you and other people? And that's what one of the concerns about shamanism is. That's one of the things it's interested in. It's
in which particular do you study shamanism as a North American concept or as a South American or Central or is it just?
I look at the whole thing. I look at the whole thing. The course that I teach is called Shamanism Past and Present, and we go all the way back and look at theories about the practice of shamanistic practices in the Paleolithic. We look at Upper Paleolithic cave art. We look at theories about and we also look at a lot of theories about early hominid behavior, early human behavior, are the very first indications of how this psychology might have been used. We look at hunter-gatherer societies, and then we also move on to complex societies, and we talk about ancient Greece and the Mayas, and other complex societies, ancient Egypt, and then we work our way all the way up to, this is where the shamanism past and present comes in, is that in the present, we look at things like cyber shamanism and transformation festivals and Burning Man and contemporary creativity, and the way that rituals like those are being used to help motivate people and make them more creative. And to be perfectly honest, this this course grew out of my experiences at the Burning Man Festival in Nevada, where I saw people willfully creating a context that made them more expressive, more creative, took them out of their everyday lives and put them into an environment that they had created for the purpose of understanding themselves and other people and the universe in better ways. And I saw it as a very mostly positive thing. I mean, there are a lot of bad things that happen at Burning Man too, but the idea of creating a canvas or a space in which you can externalize whatever is internal, and create art, create music, create performance, create dress, all of those types of things, dance, you name it, I saw as a very positive thing. And I wanted to understand how to get more of that stuff.
Yeah. So, and what would you say are some sites that you find the most important to teach, or the most exciting, or to demonstrate the transformative to you? And
archaeological sites?
Yeah, archaeological sites.
Oh,
I love real history.
Yeah, well, I love archaeological sites of every kind.
Right.
You know, I would encourage people to go to some place like Teotihuacan outside of Mexico City, where the great big pyramids are. I mean, that just kind of makes you realize the enormity of what it is that humans are able to create, if they are motivated to do that.
Right.
You know, I love Machu Picchu. It's one of my favorite go-to places. I have archaeological sites in Costa Rica that I love, just because they're so real. You can see right there on the ground and pick up and touch those things that people were using 2,000 years ago, and that's a connectedness that I think is really super valuable. It helps me to figure out where I am in this stream of time and human experience.
And so shouldn't it be though that sciences, including archaeology, you know, are in a sense provided for, so we're not only limited, you know, to what's funded? I mean, in other words, what I'm saying is military, as I'm sure you know, with my own political opinion, I don't think that we should be spending so much on military. I mean, obviously, things like science, I feel, are more beneficial to humanity, you know, than more tanks.
I completely agree. I think our defense spending budget is just insane relative to all the things that we could be spending money on. I think humans benefit from knowledge. We should be generating more knowledge, generating new knowledge. I think that we need more scientists and better education and all of that stuff. I don't think that we have anything close to all of the answers. And I also don't think that traditional religions have come close to giving us all the answers. They do provide people with options, and you know, and you could look at, there's a wonderful book by Alice Beck Kehoe. You might want to write this down. It's called Militant Christianity, and it sort of begins with how it was that Christianity had its birth in an ideology that was very useful for the soldiers of Constantine, because they would be more ferocious in battle if they thought that they were going to get a reward in heaven afterwards. So it became very useful for people who were going to be engaging in extreme violence. And that has become a metaphor throughout. Well, that's a very interesting construction, but I think defense.
I did get the book of archaeology, I think, of religious violence. I can't remember if that's the right title, but I did read the book of archaeology of religious violence or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's related to that. But this Militant Christianity book is quite interesting and enlightening. But among the things that I think it helps to show is how some religious beliefs are very practical with regard to getting people to engage in things that are probably not very good for a lot of people. Violence and conquest being some examples of those. But essentially, it makes the argument that the military metaphor has been much more common in Christian practice than most people realize. And you know, that's not to rag on Christianity. There are a lot of other religions for which that's true as well. And there's violence in all religions. If you want to look at if you want to look at Buddhism, you can find it. If you look at Hinduism, you can find it. If you look at Judaism, you can find it. If you look at Islam, you can find it. I don't think religion has helped people to be less violent in general.
I agree, because to me it's just it's a form of separate tribalism. So it doesn't even desire. That's not a desire. They always say we want peace. Oh, you mean if only your sect is left?
That's right.
For some people, I'm not saying everyone experiences religion this way, but there's some people that they feel like unless their sect, not just even the religion, like say Islam, might fight other people that are in Islam. So it's really my sect, my little, whatever. That's it. That's all I want to win.
Well, there's some religious traditions that are what are called triumphalist, that the ultimate goal is to triumph over all of the others. And then there are other approaches, which I think include our own, which are much more open and tolerant. And I there are certain things that I don't believe in, but it doesn't really bother me that other people believe different things, so long as they're not having a negative impact on me and my life or people I care about. It's sort of a live and let live, and whatever works for people is super important, because all of us deal with shitty things. All of us deal with, the loss of loved ones, or the loss of a job, or depression, or poverty, or whatever. And everyone needs a bag of tools to go to deal with those. If you're going to stay in this world, and deal with those really shitty things, you need some tools that help you do that. And people have all different kinds of tools, and those are really important. Those tools are really important. And I don't mean to dismiss any religious belief at all if it's one of those tools, if it's helping people to cope. The issue is when it begins to have an impact on other people in negative ways. That's the problem.
Yeah, what's sad though, that archaeologists can't always feel like they can speak against that. I don't agree with Graham Hancock about people not wanting to talk about his stuff. But I had a friend who was an archaeologist and then went and taught for a college. I don't even want to say which one because I don't want to make him mad telling who he is. But he basically had a show and he was like an atheist and out as archaeologist, and some people that were Jewish, I believe, are the ones that came at him really, really hard because of some of the stuff he said. And so he just said he didn't want to deal with it. He pulled his channel off. I had a video by him. He told him, take it down. And I was just like, because he got attacked. He goes, I don't have time for this. And and maybe I should just, let it all go. People can believe whatever they want. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's the right answer, but okay.
Right. Well, something I've experienced, and I don't know whether this is going to result in more of it, but they're total strangers, people who I hadn't got a clue who they are, who are sending me email out of the blue saying, Professor Hoops, you're a coward and you need to debate Graham Hancock, or, all these really negative things. Who writes to a stranger out of the blue to tell them that they're a coward? That just doesn't make any sense to me. It's not helping this world in any way.
It's not. And like I said, I don't feel you're a coward, even if you never debate him, because I feel like you don't have to debate him. He has to show the evidence. I mean,
let me ask you a question, Damien. Let me ask you a question, Damien. Who do you see on Twitter every day, me or Graham Hancock?
You.
I'm there. People want to come talk to me, debate me, whatever. I'm there. I'm available. Graham Hancock, is he available? Is he answering people's emails? Is he answering people's requests by Twitter or any of that stuff? Does he interact with his audience at all?
I don't know. So I don't,
except through Joe Rogan. I just don't see it.
Okay. Well, I just so people understand. I don't want to say I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't. Like I said already, I don't link. In fact, I'm not going to link Graham Hancock in him because I could care less. If he finds this and is offended by it, too bad. I mean, but I'm not doing it for anything to do with him in a sense. I really care about the facts and.
Yeah, I and that totally makes sense, and I think that's the right approach. But all I'm saying is that you were telling me this story about your friend and the negative reactions he was getting.
That's true.
The day after Hancock invited me to debate him and I turned him down, I had to block over 100 trolls on Twitter because I was just getting so many negative comments from what I referred to as kind of Hancock true believers who felt that it was up to them to defend the faith, to put me down because I had questioned him. or because I had declined to debate him, so therefore I was the scum of the earth. Which is, that's not a good sign. When people are doing that,
no, it's not.
That shows you that they are zealots, that they're believers, that they are being motivated by something other than a desire to find out what the truth is, and instead to sort of push their views on other people. And I think a lot of this is just psychological projection. It's people who are very insecure about their own beliefs, who are trying to strengthen their own beliefs for themselves by putting up this defense system against anybody who might lead them to question that.
I can see that seems true. But like I was saying is I'm really even more amazed because I've had a personal experience where an archaeologist was kind of doing activism and he just said, "Whoa, this is too much."
Yeah.
And so that's why I was saying the fact that you're doing this, I feel you're great. I'm just saying that I'm not just like I said, it's not like I'm just have some academic bias. I really feel like, wow, this person is actually caring. This is amazing.
Well, we don't sit in our ivory tower and not interact with the general public. That's just not true. I've been teaching at the University of Kansas since 1989, and people say, "Oh, you don't interact with the general public." Who the hell do they think my students are? I teach at a state university in the Midwest. My students are the general public.
Right.
I've taught thousands of them. I interact with the general public every single day. And my publications are available online if somebody wants to read them and download them. Yeah, some things are written at a higher level that require some background to be able to understand them. And they may not be written for Joe the plumber or the average person who doesn't have a background in archaeology, but they're there. If somebody wants to pursue that stuff and read it, they're there. They're available. But I really do think that I try to address the general public. I really do feel like I've made an effort over the years. As I said, I've been online in one way or another since 1985.
Wow.
I was using bulletin board systems, FidoNet back in the day. I was on Usenet. I was on listservs for a long time. What else? I first got on Facebook in 2005, the year after it started. I've been on Facebook almost weekly for as long as Facebook's been around. So when people try to paint me or my colleagues really as stuck in our ivory tower and not caring what the general public wants to know, that's just bullshit. We have been there on a regular basis, and I am and will be. It's what I do.
Well, I was going to say too, my experience personally with other archaeologists, I had several friends that were archaeologists when I was allowed on LinkedIn before I got banned. Just like I got banned from Facebook
and from LinkedIn,
Instagram, all for different reasons.
Okay.
Facebook was because I said that voting for Donald Trump to me was like Jews voting for Hitler, and I got removed, deplatformed. Then on LinkedIn, which I had 11,000 people, and like probably 60% were archaeologists or anthropologists. I had a lot of people that were my friends. They got mad because I posted a thing about the Bible. I do art, not like cartoonish kind of, but I did this thing of a boat, and I was saying the ethics of God. God, I will not follow a God that supposedly the Bible is true, killed the whole earth. I mean, I wouldn't follow Kim Jong-un. I'm not following some God that's a Kim Jong-un. I mean, this makes no difference to me. Anyways, but I drew a thing where the person was drowning, and this Christian got really offended and turned me in, and so basically people complaining that I was using the site not for normal purposes, but to push activism. So actually, I after that happened, I slowed down, and then I ended up stopping activism. Now I just want to get ideas out and sort of teach what I know and try to learn more stuff. So I'm done with activism because I don't want to get deplatformed from Twitter because they're out to get.
Well, I think that's exactly right, and I've been I've been concerned about Twitter. I've been concerned about Facebook in part because there's a cyber war going on, and there are people who organize groups of trolls.
Yes, exactly.
To particular voices and silence us. I mean, there's an active strategy for doing that. And I don't know whether you read about this, but there's actually there were calls for people to start posting fake course reviews on Rate My Professor for courses that they had never taken, to try to actively discourage students from enrolling in courses of professors who were being outspoken about.
It's always the free speech warriors who want to like make lists of professors or like make like these fake online like reviews of courses. They always they want to silence
exactly right.
progressive voices as much as they can.
Yeah, but then they'll say, "Oh no,
I think that's exactly right.
That no one wants to hear from." Like, you know.
Right. Yeah, I think that has been my experience as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, the fact that you speak out is super needed, and you know, I had to change how I approach people because I was getting deplatformed, but I still want to do the truth, and that's why I thought that you should be on. And I'm actually going to have several archaeologists come on and all talk about similar stuff in pseudoarchaeology. Then I want to do a thing on pseudoarchaeology. Then I'm going to actually give my video on what I feel from my own knowledge, whatever, about why he's wrong. So I want to show that I want to first go get these other people, and I want to hear their ideas, and then I want to show what I consider, because I know a lot of people, when they say pseudoarchaeology, they think you're just being like offensive or something. And I don't know how you, in a sense, see it. It's like fake, or like in a sense, you're like, because he'll say, I'm talking about Graham Hancock. Graham Hancock will say, "Well, I'm just a journalist." Yeah, but then you say that the archaeologists are wrong, and that the right answer. What the? So you're not
he's also not
journalism.
Well, talk to a journalist. What he's doing is not journalism. A journalism doesn't ask the questions and then answer them himself. A journalism asks the questions, then brings in an expert or brings in experts with different opinions. They don't present their own opinions. That's not journalism. Well,
Good
I mean, it's opinion paper. It's writing opinion things, but that's only a small.
Everybody's
part
a columnist now.
Yeah, exactly. But the term pseudoarchaeology, which I prefer, is different from, say, cult archaeology or fringe archaeology or alternative archaeology, because what I point out is that none of those things are archaeology. You don't want to use a phrase that implies that something is a different kind of archaeology, because it's not archaeology. There's archaeology, and if it's not archaeology, then don't call it that. So alternative archaeology is not archaeology, and there is no such thing as mainstream archaeology. There's only archaeology. It's sort of like what people used to say about what you call alternative medicine that works? Medicine.
Yeah.
It's that type of thing. And actually, I need to leave in about 10 minutes. We hadn't really talked about what this time was. No, like I said, in about 10 minutes, I need to take off. But I really enjoyed talking with you about this, and I'm really glad it me. Make sure that people know what my Twitter handle is, and please go ahead and
yeah. I just so you know, I'm going to put the blog post I made. I'm going to put it in the information for the video, and then the video in the blog, because I have like 100,000 people that follow my blog, but I only have like 2,000 something that follow my YouTube. I don't weird, but
yeah. Well,
but anyways, I'm going to do both actually, so that they're going to be. But go ahead and plug whatever you want for your stuff, so they can find where to.
Well, something that you guys will probably appreciate, communists as you are, is that something that people find very strange is that I don't have anything to sell. I'm not trying to sell a book. I don't have any ads for you. I'm not trying to make money. In fact, archaeologists typically are not motivated by money. Anybody who says, "Oh, I went into archaeology for the money," is insane. There is no money in archaeology. the books that you see behind me on this shelf, not one of them was ever a bestseller. Academic books are not bestsellers. You know,
Right.
if we're lucky, you know, the last books I published had print runs of about 1,500 copies. Okay, the idea of having a million seller in archaeologies doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. That's, I mean, granted, people are interested in archaeology. There's no reason why somebody shouldn't write a New York Times bestseller in archaeology. That'd be great if somebody did, but it's not archaeologists who are doing that. It's, you know, there are plenty of hungry professional writers. And actually, my plug is this: if there's a hungry professional writer out there who would like to collaborate with me, and they would like to be the first author on a New York Times bestseller about all of this type of stuff, come find me. I would love to help you write your book. But I'm not a professional writer. I'm not selling a book. I don't have a book here to show you. I don't say buy my book. That's now Graham Hancock and others do that, but I'm not making a living by selling trade books. I'm making a living as a scientist, writing articles. I specialize in things that not very many people know about or even care about. That's sort of how I built my career, is by doing research on things that I find very interesting, that I think are very important, that I hope that someday someone else will discover and say, oh man, it's great that Hoops did that because that was really important. But I'm content working in my world of specialization with the people who I work with. I don't need it to be on Netflix. I don't need it to be on the History Channel. I don't need to be it doesn't need to sell in the airport bookstore. That's not where I get my validation
At this point, being on Netflix or the History Channel would almost discredit a person.
Yeah, well, that's true. And actually, in academia, and this has been a problem, there has been sort of a bias against those people who are commercial, who are doing things to make money. You know, but we do need textbooks, and some people earn money from writing textbooks. We do need to reach the general public, and there are people who reach the general public through their books. But those are not the things that motivate us first and foremost. What motivates us most is the generation of new knowledge that did not exist before, or attention and expertise on topics that there needs to be somebody in the world who's an expert on that. And I'm sort of like that with some of the things that I do. I could count on a single hand the number of other people who know what I know in depth about a particular topic. And I like to think that I exist in the world because there needs to be at least one expert of these 11 billion people on the planet. There needs to be at least one person who knows some of the stuff that I know. And
real quick, could you just tell us like 3 of them? Even if it's just a highlight.
I specialize in the archaeology of what I refer to as the Isthmo-Colombian area, which is the archaeology of Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, and Colombia. It's not Mexico. It's not Peru. It's a very important part of the Americas. I've spent most of my career focusing on the archaeology of Costa Rica, which is a big tourist destination, but most people don't go there to look at the archaeology. But I think it's important that somebody understand the archaeology of Costa Rica pretty well. And I also think that the area that I study is important because it was adjacent to and interacting with Mexico and Mesoamerica and the Mayas. It was also interacting with the Antilles and the islands of the Caribbean. It was interacting with the Amazon, and I'm very interested in the relationship between Amazonia and Central America. And it was also interacting with cultures to the south in the Andes, not necessarily directly, but you know, I feel, and not everybody will agree with this, that the area that I study is literally the center of the Americas. It connected with areas to the north and to the south, but it's been kind of obscure. It's been something people haven't paid as much to as the big advanced civilizations of the Mayas and the Aztecs and the Incas and whatnot. I focus on smaller level societies, and actually the societies that I study are ones that I think were largely politically decentralized. I'm very interested in heterarchies versus hierarchies.
Oh, me too.
I'm very interested in how kind of networked relationships of shifting authority, depending on the situation, were utilized. I'm interested in cultures that went for thousands of years without destroying their environment, as opposed to the ones that organized armies and deforested big areas and then collapsed because of what they've done to the environment. I'm interested in the smaller scale societies that were successful, because I really think there's a lot to be learned from that. And Hancock talks about advanced civilizations. Well, is a civilization really advanced if it destroys the environment in which it's living? If it changes the water and the species and the forests and everything else? Or is it advanced if it's actually living sustainably for thousands of years without causing any of that destruction or deteroration?
And I agree. Just like, to me, a civilized society, if you ask me, I would say ones where the weakest are protected.
Yeah, I think there's
everyone's needs are taken care of. I mean, that's civilized. And I mean, I don't. So when someone says civilized, I'm just saying maybe my bias, but that's what I think. I think if a civilized is your behavior, ethical behavior as a society.
Right. Well, what I like to point out is that there are two variables that have always increased throughout the history of humanity, and these are worth thinking about. One of those variables is the absolute number of human beings on the planet. That has constantly increased, and over time has increased at a very fast rate. So we now have 11 billion people on the planet. The other variable is the absolute difference between the poorest person on the planet and the richest person on the planet. That has constantly increased throughout human experience. Okay, millions of years ago, we were all exactly equal. Nobody had anything more than anybody else. And now we've got the poorest person on the planet who just died of malnutrition while we were talking. And actually, the poorest person is the person who's going to be dying the next minute. Oh, they just died just now. The poorest person on the planet just was a malnourished infant who just died. Oh, here's another one. Oh, wait, there are thousands of them. Wait, in the next half hour, how many of them are going to die? Okay, you get the picture, right?
Well, you're starting to make me feel like crying. So, actually thinking about that, I forget. But yeah.
And at the same time, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, you name it, their fortunes are clicking. Just as each of the poorest people have died, they've made another few $1 million or $10 million or whatever it is that the markets are doing. The wealthy are becoming phenomenally more wealthy, and the poor are actually becoming more poor because the environment is being degraded. So that, in fact, poor people were richer 100 years ago because they had access to more resources. Those resources are disappearing. So the poorer people are getting even more poor because the natural resources that they might have gone to are being degraded, or the social resources are being degraded. So in fact, extreme poverty is becoming worse, and extreme wealth is becoming greater. And that has been constantly, the absolute difference between the two has been constantly increasing throughout the human experience. Where does it end? Where does it go? Is that a good thing?
I don't think it's a good thing.
I don't think it's a good thing either. I really think that we need to figure out how to reverse some of these things.
Oh, absolutely.
And population growth is not the greatest thing for the planet. We can't go from 11 billion to 22 billion to 33 billion to 44 billion. That just ain't going to happen. And increasing the absolute difference between the poorest person and the wealthiest person, I just don't think that's a good thing. I'd rather see it go the other direction, to be perfectly honest. I don't think the wealthy need to be as wealthy and powerful as they are. And I don't think
there should be someone a billionaire.
Well, I think that there should be talk about minimum wage. There ought to be a maximum wage.
Absolutely.
But that's a whole other topic.
Well, it is a topic though we like on this show.
Yeah. But those are the things that you asked me what I was interested in. Those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in.
Well, I really appreciate and honor that you came on, and I keep doing what you're doing. It's wonderful. But even if you don't, I think you've already done an immense, gift to humanity by doing this.
Well, I try. I try to do it. I try to do it with heart. I try to do it with humor. Some people don't like my jokes or think that I'm not, that I'm making fun of things or belittling things or ridiculing things. Graham Hancock got very offended by something I said about his wife, which is that somebody had misidentified her ethnicity, and I wrote a tweet in which I said that she's actually Tamil from Malaysia, but that Hancock probably thinks she's Lemurian. And he got very offended by that, but I wasn't intending any offense, because Lemurians, they're supposed to be superior, right?
Right.
You know?
I don't know what is. I'm sorry, I don't know what a Lemurian is.
Well, Oh, okay. Well, you need to do some Googling on this. Lemuria is like Atlantis, only in the Pacific.
Oh,
Lemuria is another lost land, another lost civilization. But that's a whole other story.
I guess
anyway,
I need to learn more pseudoarchaeology.
Well, it's worth learning, because it's an interesting fantasy world, but it also helps us to explain our own pop culture. And Atlantis has become pop culture. Look at Little Mermaid. Look at Wakanda Forever. Look at Aquaman. Atlantis has become a part of our culture, and there's just more of it all the time.
True. Well, everyone appreciate you checking out, and go and follow and support. What he's doing, because it's needed. So to me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I got to run, but it's been a real pleasure talking with you. Thank you for inviting me. Cory, it's nice to meet you too. We haven't talked quite as much. I feel like Damien's been talking all the talking here. But I'd be happy to come on anytime you like.
Awesome.
So think about having me back. I'd love to come back and talk about other stuff sometime.
Oh, definitely. And it may be some of your research or something that you find interesting.
Yeah, sure.
Or come and talk to us about your thing about shamanism, like I said, or animism or totemism. I like all that stuff. So
I'd be happy to talk about any of that stuff. I'm here, I'm available, and I enjoy talking about it, obviously.
Great. All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks a bunch.
Do you want me to end this recording as well?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Hello, and welcome to my channel. I am Damien Marie AtHope. In the simplest terms, I am an atheist-humanist philosopher and prehistorical writer-researcher at DamienMarieAtHope.com. I am specifically an axiological atheist. An axiological atheism can be thought to involve ethical and value theory reasoned and moral argument driven apatheism, agnosticism, atheism, antitheism, antireligionism, secularism, and humanism. Axiological atheists can be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. As an axiological atheism's ethically reasoned and constructive pro-humanity. I am an axiological thinker, value theorist. The science of goodness, worthiness, usefulness, valuableness, virtue, reliableness, accuracy, validity, morality, integrity, beneficialness, etc., etc. We axiologists have a value consciousness. And in general, we see the architecture of humanistic humanitarianism value in people that we see as dignity beings. Places and things are not. Axiology is a value theory. In its broadest sense, it involves areas of philosophy that are deemed to encompass some evaluative or evaluation aspect. Therefore, it crosses almost all domains in some way or another. Now for a more detailed terms as to what I am. I am an axiological atheist, an anti-theist, an anti-religionist, secularist, humanist, rationalist, writer, artist, poet, philosopher, advocate, activist with schooling in psychology, sociology, as well as I am an autodidact, self-taught in science, archaeology, anthropology, and philosophy. I promote science and am against pseudoscience, pseudohistory, pseudomorality, things that are found in religion.